All right, thank you everyone for being here for our first Q&A session. Today we're going to be talking about the Lancaster Reproduction series and talking about the Thorncaster pistol. We can go ahead and open up the floor. Garrett, if you have any questions, feel free, ask away. I've got models up in the background and some stuff that I can show too to help talk to some of these points. But if there's anything that you're really interested in or want to know about, ask away.
All right, thanks. Thanks for doing this, first of all. Small list of questions here. So my first question was, what are all the differences between the Thorncaster and the original Lancaster pistol?
I do want to make one that is actually more of like an accurate representation that is, it has the rifling in the barrel machining itself. But for more of a commercial product, something that can be more diverse, I do plan on trying to make one with barrel liners. All you need is essentially one design for the pistol itself, and then I can use different barrel liners that all have the same outside diameter, and then the bore of them is just different calibers. But other than that, there are a few other features that I do want to change. I want to improve on the sights a little bit too. The sights on the original Lancaster pistol are very open because it's supposed to be something that's used more or less at a closer range. So I want to try to tighten those up a little bit, and part of doing that is I'm actually going to increase the range of this pistol itself. So the original barrels are actually slightly angled, right? And there's a point out in space where they'll all converge. And so you see these lines here. Essentially, this was me doing calculations and figuring out what is the center line distance between these barrels are going to be, because they are all slightly angled inward. When I took my measurements of the original Lancaster pistol, this only came out to be about 6 feet away from the tip of the barrel, which isn't very far. And so my plan is to increase that to about 25 feet. Something that's going to give you some more range, is going to increase the accuracy of it, right? Because if it was only set for 6 feet, then after you pull the trigger, the bullet travels 6 feet, and then after that, your spread starts to increase drastically. So, past about 10 feet, your accuracy is going to be not that great. So I definitely do want to make it so this does have more range. It has more versatility with it. So part of that is also for if you're using this, say, for target shooting, or if you want to go use this for hunting or something of the sort like that, because, these pistols were initially made to hold shot shell. You had asked earlier on the Discord of what calibers do I want to do this in, like 45 long Colt, which, you can use shot shell in that, or even variants of the 410 shotgun shells. And so having it where this has more range, so you're able to use it in, say, more of even a hunting aspect, say like hunting pheasants or something of the sort like that, it opens up that opportunity to be able to use this in more situations than just up close and personal. Like I said, I do plan on still making more of a true variant that does have the original barrel machining. But there were a few little nuances throughout it. I'm trying to keep it as true as possible, but some of the stuff that I found is a lot of these pistols were kind of custom made, so that the parts, they're not universal parts, right? If you actually look at these hooks here versus these lugs, they're different on each side, and they're actually hand ground or hand sanded and filed down so that they fit perfectly with each other. So if I go and take one of these barrel machinings and I take the screw out here and I try to put it on a different Lancaster pistol, even one of the same size and caliber, it's not going to fit. So I want to take this away from a more unique individual part to part fit and make it something that's a little bit more modular. Even some of the stuff, so with this extractor lever here and with the extractor itself, kind of some of the same situations with that. One of the things I talked about in my video, getting back to it here, but this feature right here, the original extractor actually has a piece here. And what this does is this fits into a groove inside the barrel machining. And so in here, this notch that I have taken out is actually for that little lever that you see here, right? This is for this to sit inside of there. And I know I'm bouncing around a lot, but I'm trying to give you a little bit of an idea of how this looks and what it actually you're seeing. So this is a cross-section view here, where this piece here is actually your extractor lever. You've got your extractor here, and let me hide the receiver. Let's turn it off so you can kind of get a better visual. But essentially, there used to be another notch here in the barrels for this extractor to actually sit in there. And what it did is it actually kind of helped the clocking of the extractor itself. So this wouldn't rotate as it's being pulled out of the barrels, right? And there's only one way that an extractor could actually fit in there. And the issue with that is you have this very long, very narrow channel that's just difficult to machine. They don't really make end mills that are that long, that are that tiny. And you'd essentially have to go to a more complicated form of machining to do that. Something that would drastically increase the price of having to machine these barrels. And so I'm trying to take into consideration manufacturability in the design. So when I make a change, It's something for producibility or manufacturability, or something to help drive costs down rather than keeping it one-to-one exactly true to the original pistols. But other than that, because I did kind of come to a stopping point with the original design and using the barrel liners, and so like I've actually been transitioning the models that I had for the Thorncaster with the barrel liners to do actually more of a final model Lancaster, almost one-to-one reproduction. Kind of the reason why I did that and I made that switch was because the design of the pistol was getting almost too large for you to hold in your hand. And with that, a lot of the mechanism and everything in the back was changing quite a bit. And so to kind of get away from having to try to like one-off completely redesign everything, I've kind of switched a little bit to doing like more or less the Lancaster pistol itself, closer to that one-to-one replica of it. So then that way I can understand how that's going to translate into doing, say, the Thorncaster itself, which is going to have, you know, a much larger frame to it. But the clockwork mechanism back here is still something that I'm working on. It's still something I haven't fully defined. So that itself, it does use a lot of like spring clips. It does use a lot of older methods that could be done a little better. So that mechanism in the back is probably going to be improved upon, but I can't really sit here and say like this is what the final product's going to be and this is how it's going to differ in terms of what's all going on back here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
And kind of help
thank you.
I have a question, or a couple of questions actually.
Sure.
So the replica is going to be made for smokeless powder, correct?
Yes. So it's going to be
Okay.
made for more current cartridges. It's not going to be made to use like black powder or some of these, you know, older cartridges from around the turn of the century when this pistol was made back in the 1800s.
Sure. So question is, maybe from a material science standpoint or just design standpoint, what changes did you make to accommodate the change from black powder to smokeless powder? Or what's planned to be changed at least?
And what you're kind of getting at is like what changes am I making so that like the barrel doesn't explode, right?
Essentially, yeah, for the higher pressures, how are you compensating for that? Is it a change in material, change in barrel thickness, etc.?
And so that's kind of, it's more or less a little bit of both. So like with the barrel liners, you can actually see this is currently set for 45 long Colt, right? And so with this, you've got the barrel liners and you've got also a lot of material around the barrel liners that, because those liners are pressed into the barrel machining itself. And the wall thicknesses are getting quite large. Now, granted, this is just an off-the-shelf barrel liner, which is supposed to be able to handle those pressures for a modern 45 long Colt. But then also, you know, yes, like adding more material around there and stuff too. But a lot of it's going to be like once I get a design and once I have it kind of more fleshed out and the materials that I'm going to use and, you know, maybe what the material of the barrel liners are going to be, or even on the more true replica, what the material is going to be, can do stress analysis and NX to find out like what is that going to come out to be. It is almost a little bit of trial and error at this point. I do plan on proofing these regardless of whatever calculations I do, whatever try to compensate for using a more modern cartridge. I do plan on testing these and making sure that they're not going to fail. But as you can see here, you know, to your question, you can see how thick the material is back here by the breech. And even when it starts to get away from the breech and the boxiness of it and you get more into the curved barrels, if you look at the thickness here from the bore to the outside of it, it gets a lot thinner as you go down, which is also kind of what the original Lancaster pistol does to a certain degree. But I'm trying to make it so that the thickness of this is actually extended further down for the longer cartridges. The current one that I've got, you know, is chambered in 476, which is very similar to 455, just a little bit longer. But if I'm going to be using 45 long Colt and, you know, somebody wants to maybe try to put 410 shot shell in here, this is going to have to be able to hold those pressures further down in the barrel. So yes, thickness increases, material properties are going to have to be looked at and analyzed. And then ultimately, regardless of all that stuff, we're going to go ahead and proof this. We're going to make a barrel, kind of create a jig, slap some shells in there, and we're going to do it like that 25, 30% overload of the charges, put it through there and see if that handles it. It's something that we could see the barrels failing on us, or they could handle just fine. But either way, we want to make sure that, you know, we're testing that to the fullest and not just releasing like a product that's just going to blow up the first couple times you shoot it. Does that answer your question?
I have another question that's more or less unrelated to that. So we talked a little bit about the planned differences between the original and the reproduction. Do you have any plans for a phase 2 or phase 3 where you release more modernized versions?
I mean, the design can always be improved upon, right? But when you say more modernized version, like what I'm trying to do is more or less a more modernized version, trying to stay a little true to it, but then also changing the designs in terms of like ease of manufacturability. But I do think later on down the road, you know, after, say I do like one that has the barrel liners, maybe one that's a little bit more true, can definitely come back and look at this and say, like a phase 2, phase 3 kind of aspect of like, what can we do to make this the most modern, most efficient, make it modular and easy to work on compared to trying to take something that's already existing. So it's something that's kind of in the back burner just because it's going to really depend on how successful these turn out to be.
So a Picatinny rail with a low power variable optic is off the table then?
It's I can you know what, I'll tell you what, because I'm changing up the sights on this and I want to make it so that you can actually do changes in the sights. I'll work with you to create a certain type of mount where you can actually put a little rail mount on here and you can put a scope on there, and I'll work with you on that, Scott, all right?
I think an ACOG would be beautiful on one of these suckers.
Okay. We'll just go hunting with the hand cannon. We can hop back to Garrett. I know you still got some other questions.
Yeah. Are you still using the rotating firing pin mechanism?
So yes. What's actually really interesting is in the video where I talked about the history of the company, the pistol, the previous owner, I even talked about some essentially like imitation knockoffs that people were making around the time. And one of them was a pistol that instead of using the rotating firing pin that actually moved around, it had like 4 separate firing pins. And one of the issues that they were running into with stuff like that is the multiple barrels would fire at the same time, or the gun would discharge when it wasn't supposed to. So one of the things about the rotating firing pin is it's something that, like 150 years later, this thing is still a very reliable mechanism. Back in the late 1800s, this pistol was known for its reliability, for not having to clean it, not having to service it. And so keeping that mechanism with making, a few tweaks to it is the direction that I do want to go. So yes, I do plan on keeping the rotating firing pin, but the mechanism itself may slightly change to be a little bit more modern or easier to manufacture or a little bit easier to use or something sort of like that.
Cool. Yeah, I like the rotating firing pin myself. Oh yeah, so you've been doing a lot of talking about barrel liners. Not too familiar with them. I think I understand.
So this is the model with the barrel liners. Let me get rid of a bunch of these datums and curves and stuff here so it's a little bit easier to just see the raw model here. So essentially, a barrel liner is something that you would essentially slap down the barrel, and it's essentially to rebore it. In certain situations, you'll actually find it where they'll have an old gun. The barrel has been worn out because it's been shot so much to the point that the barrel's degraded, it's been oversized, maybe it's pitted from the type of ammo, like the corrosive ammo you've used or something of the sort. And so what they'll do is they'll go through and they'll actually bore out the barrel itself, and then they'll slide a barrel liner in there, and what that does is that allows them to get essentially a crisp, clean bore in a damaged barrel. I looked online, and actually kind of what I'm basing this model off of is something that's just off the shelf. Because usually what you would find is, say in a case like this, say this bore got damaged, they would oversize it, and then they'd put the barrel liner in there that has the correct bore, and it's able to be press fit in there, and they sometimes use like different types of epoxies and stuff of the sort. But my idea is to essentially use that out of the gate and make it so that way with this machining itself that I start off with, I can use any kind of a different barrel liner. So this is essentially like what I would start off with, right? Then depending on whatever caliber somebody wants the pistol to be chambered in, I can then press fit 45 long Colt barrel liner in here, a 357, a 44 special, something of that sort, whatever they would want. And I can then take the original design with the different barrel liners can be used to have it chambered at any caliber that somebody would want without a complete redesign of the pistol. So a little bit of a kind of how they're used, what they're used for, and then how I'm integrating that into my design.
Okay, cool. So it's a permanent attachment, not something that the buyer could remove?
I have been trying to think of how do I want this design to actually be so that way these barrel liners could be interchangeable. To start off with, I would like to have something that makes these barrel liners a bit more modular, so that way you can actually slide in whatever kind of barrel liner you want to use. You have your base frame without any liners in it. There's some sort of a mechanism that actually, when you slide the liners in there, it'll hold them in place in the correct orientation, and it's very easy to then change whatever caliber you want to be shooting.
Thank you.
What about it's like a shotgun barrel liner? So you can shoot different calibers out of your shotguns. Have you thought about that route, that you just slide it in that way?
That would be an option. So I've got, my counter bore for where my casing will sit, my flanged casing will sit, right? So you're saying if I had a different barrel liner that I slid in there, and then that could be for, say, 357 or for 38 special or something of the sort like that. that would actually be an option. So then like I start off with say, hey, I have this design. It starts off with 45 long Colt, and then you put the different liners in there that sit in there, kind of like how you were saying, like with a shotgun or something, and you can actually change the caliber. And that's what you're getting at, correct, Mike?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
I guess Garrett, back to you.
All right. The original Thorncaster with no barrel liner would be in 45 Colt then? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, both of them are going to be set to be 45. That's going to be like the largest caliber that I'm going to do, and that's going to be kind of like the baseline model is 45 long Colt.
Thanks. Yeah, personally, the reason I was asking about barrel liners is because I wasn't familiar with them, and I'd just be most interested in one without the liners in the 45 Colt. The interchangeability really doesn't matter to me. I was just curious.
Right, and so kind of why, I don't want to say I've been dragging my feet, but why I've been kind of going back and it's been taking me a little longer to progress with the design is because using the barrel liners initially was kind of an interesting idea, but I'm kind of almost to the point where I'm thinking I might do away from that or go away from that. To Mike's point, if I can have it where more or less an original one, it doesn't have any barrel liners, it's more or less a truer replica, and it doesn't deal with the whole liner situation, everything too, seems to be a more desirable path, especially for, like you're saying, like from a customer standpoint, this is, what you would like to see. But the other aspect too is as I use the barrel liners, what this is doing is this is causing the pistol to become much wider in your hand. With that, the issue is how are you going to be able to hold that, and how are you going to be able to grip that, and how's that going to work for you? The upscaling of everything has, besides causing a lot more time and effort being put into the redesign, it's causing a lot of issues with just how you're going to be able to use the thing. Having something like this would be more ideal, but then there is kind of the caveat to it, which is kind of almost a little bit more in favor of the liners, because when it comes to rifling these, we would have to make sure that we're rifling to center of each of the barrels, because like I stated earlier, each of these barrels are off at a slight angle. And so whenever you go to do your rifling, you got to make sure that you're putting your button or whatever you're going to use to rifle this, you've got to make sure that you're pulling that through straight in line with that barrel. If I say take this barrel and I just set it on a desk and I try to, push a button through there or something of the sort like that, and I just push straight down on it, well, this barrel's at a slight angle, so I'm going to be creating a not concentric rifling with that barrel. It creates a little bit more complication with making sure that I get the correct rifling in there and making sure that the rifling comes out perfectly in line with the barrel and it's not off because the barrel is slightly angled. And that barrels, they're angled to the point that they're not perpendicular to, say, either the breech or the tip of the barrel. And so kind of the idea with the barrel liners was that took away the whole need of having to bore the barrels themselves and create any rifling in there, because once I create the bores for the liners, then all I do is I press the liners in there, they've already got the rifling in them, and I'm good to move forward. So, and like I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm also trying to help you understand kind of like where I'm coming from with why I'm going this other direction and what my idea or why my reasoning for going this other direction was.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Like I said, there's kind of a pro and con aspect to it. The barrel liner side of things makes it where it'd be a very easy to manufacture, more commercially available kind of a product. This would be a little bit more involved, right? Regardless, because now you're having to do so much more to this barrel itself and put everything into the barrel rather than having a sleeve that's pushed in there.
I want to talk about the extractor. When you break it down, it lifts the four casings up, right? But it doesn't eject them. Is there an ejector rod, or at that point you just pull them out and put new ones in?
So essentially you just pull them out or you dump them out, actually. And let me, I can actually show you a little bit about this too here. So let me dig through some of my files really quickly. I want to open this up and I feel like it's going to start off being loud. Looks like it's going to start playing music. So give me a second. Let me open this up, pause it, like mute the music on it. So this is the montage that I threw up on YouTube, right? Essentially, and you've got, me, my gunsmith, my girlfriend shooting the pistol. So here we can actually see it kind of operating. And so it goes up, and then after it gets to a certain point, the extractor will actually snap back down. So all it does is it lifts them out, and then the extractor snaps back down into the barrel once you reach the full 90-degree bend from the receiver. So there's only just the extractor, and what you do is you just dump them out. And actually what you can see here is, because this is chambered in 476, which also takes the 455, which the 455, it's a shorter casing, right? And so what ended up happening here is like as we do that and we let it snap back down, sometimes these casings wouldn't completely fall back out and they'd go underneath the extractor, which is what you're seeing here. But essentially, no, there is no like ejector mechanism in it. It's just more of an extractor, and then either you not necessarily pull them out by hand, but you flip the gun upside down and you can just dump the shells that way. And you can see here as I take it and I open the barrel and just they fall right out. In order to make some sort of like an ejector mechanism that actually shoot them out, there's going to have to be a lot more that goes into this barrel. And it's one of those things that's like, the barrel's already very complex as it is. I'm also very scrapped for space inside of here between, the barrels having to have room for the little lever here, the extractor itself. Having more stuff cut away from here and more springs and everything put in there is, I just don't really have the space for that in my current configuration to make it where it actually shoots the shells out. It'd be more or less one of those where you can just dump it over and the casings can fall out, as you can see here.
Yeah, I still like that, and it's more original too.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a crazy idea.
Go for it. I'm open to ideas.
Too familiar with speed loaders,
Mm-hmm.
but what if you could have like a 4-round square speed loader?
So that was also something that I was considering too. So have like a speed loader, or do you know what a moon clip is?
Yeah, like the crescent shape?
Yeah, and so essentially like for, revolvers, you'd have your speed loader, but like what they would actually do is they'd have like this little plate that holds the back of all the bullets. And you put it on there and actually, like you put it in the back of the cylinder of the revolver and you slide the cylinder over and it sits in there just kind of holding the back of the bullets, right? So like we could probably make like a speed loader kind of a deal for that. But what I'm kind of getting at with the moon clips is like having it where this extractor, you could say swap out this extractor and it would actually be recessed even further to the point that it's actually holding on to the casings themselves. And then essentially like you set it in there or with all, the 4 bullets kind of attached to it, and then you're able to close it because there's enough space for that clip because this extractor would not be as thick, it'd be thinner. And you'd have a little recess for a moon clip to put that in there. Initially, my buddies and I, we sat down and said, hey, what would be a good idea? What could we do this to make this more commercially available, to make it more marketable, more ideal, right? So, because, there's going to be the people that do want the more original version and people who want something that's a little bit more diverse. And part of that was, if we make it where the pistol could use, say, moon clips, then you could have like 45 ACP because they snap around the groove in the 45 ACP rounds and they hold them on that clip and you put them in there and that kind of acts as the flange that holds them in place. Like what you see with your 45 long Colt where they sit on this counterboard, that moon clip actually acts as that flange holding those casings there, and you can then open up a whole nother type of ammo that you can put through these. So it is something that we're looking into, and it's something we've considered. Probably a speed loader type of thing could be more available for the first generations that come off the line, and then more of your moon clips and being able to open up diversity in the ammo and stuff of the sort would probably be like Gen 2, Gen 3 kind of a deal.
Sounds cool, yeah. So we were talking about 410 shotgun shells too.
Mm-hmm.
And those could be fired through the 45 Colt barrels?
I believe so. I think you just have to be wary of like the length of them.
I like that too. It's a cool feature.
And so to kind of keep this more true to it, originally if you go back and you look at any of the advertisements for the Lancaster pistols, which you could go to that history video I had and I even talked about all the stuff that they offered for it. Shot shell was a big thing for these pistols. You could either have your lead bullets or your shot shell, right? And those were your 2 primary choices of ammo at the time. So like I do want to make it so this is still more indicative of like what you were getting from, say, back in the day. Like ideally I would make this, as true as possible, have oval bore rifling, but with like laws and regulations and stuff now, it makes it a little bit more complicated. Not to say that it can't be done, but even take, say, like the governor or the judge, right? By, you have TARS that makes one, and I forget who makes the other one, but they're a 45 410 pistol, or that's what they're designed to be able to take 410 shotgun shells in their revolver, but the barrels themselves are actually rifled, so it doesn't really help the spread of it. If anything, the shot shell is probably going to be more damaging the rifling, but there are options available for that, and it has proven to be, an interesting piece of, something that people would be interested in having and what have you. So I don't want to take away one of the base features of the firearm itself and limit that. So I want to be able to make it so it's almost as true as possible within reason, right? And there's going to be more commercially available with, say, regular conventional rifling. And then you're probably going to have one that's going to be like your class 3. It's considered like a smoothbore pistol, but it'll have the oval bore rifling, and you can put shot shell through there, and you'll never have any issue with it.
I think that'd be good. Thanks. What's that software you're using where you show the 3D models?
Well, that's NX.
Since the original Lancaster had foot grips, are you planning on getting them manufactured specifically to the dimensions that the Lancaster had? Or are you going to go for more of a find a revolver grip and modify those to fit the Lancaster or a Thorncaster?
So I do want to kind of keep a more true shape to it. You know, I definitely think down the road with other options, you know, as this thing maybe becomes, you know, more popular, you know, the options become more variable, stuff like having, you know, a rifle scope mounted to the thing, right? You know, definitely I think the pistol grip has room to change and become more optimal. But to start with, I'm gonna keep things as original as possible. And actually, what's really interesting is the way that you actually hold the Lancaster pistol compared to other firearms, other pistols, say like your 1911s or your Bred M9s and stuff of the sort like that. You hold it in a very unique way that actually helps reduce the recoil of it significantly compared to more modern firearms. And that's actually something that I'm working on. I'll actually, I guess, consider this a sneak peek. Let me see here. So this was something I'm working on. So I did that little montage, right, about shooting the pistol. But what you can actually see here, and what I'm showing is essentially this is like how your hand is actually on the pistols themselves. And what's unique about the Lancaster pistols, if you look at the Beretta that I have here, you've got your center line for the barrel way above your hand. Where with the Lancaster, you've got the barrels kind of more in line with your hand, and I'll show it here a little bit. It's like these are your lower barrels here. These are, and kind of showing the moment about your wrist that's going to create, you know, the recoil versus, you know, your upper barrel. But then if you look at something, say like a Beretta and how you hold it, how it's got more of a straight grip to it, it's going to create, you know, a much larger moment about your wrist to give it more recoil. So trying to keep the Lancaster pistols as true as possible, where like, you know, the lower barrel is almost, you know, kind of right in line with the top of your wrist and the top of your arm there. And, you know, the upper barrel is going to give you a little bit more recoil too, because it's up higher. But you shouldn't see anywhere as near as, say, if you have, you know, a 45 caliber semi-automatic pistol where the barrel is much higher, and it's going to create a much larger moment. So I do want to try to keep things as original, but I do think there are options to make it a little bit more ergonomic and to make it so it fits your hand a little bit better. So consider that a little bit of a sneak peek of an upcoming video.
Are you doing this whole project by yourself?
Pretty much. I've got my moral support, my emotional support friends that kind of help out, and they'll, you know, give advice or have input, and some of my buddies review my videos and stuff of the sort like that. But for the most part, pretty much everything I'm doing is just one-man team. And I say that, but like I do have a gunsmith that's been helping me out with a lot of stuff, such as like reloading ammo, also giving me input on saying, hey, I want to change the design. What do you think about how it was manufactured? What do you think would be a better option? So, you know, I do have like resources to consult, but for the most part, like with doing the designing, the modeling, stuff of the sort like that, and like all the research and stuff in the videos, that's pretty much all me.
That's pretty cool that you do it all by yourself.
Yeah, it was something that I thought would be interesting. I think once I found the Lancaster pistol and like I got myself one, and, you know, I'm looking into it more and more, and I'm like, this is just a really cool piece, and I think it'd be really cool to, say, bring some of these back, right? Because there's something that just kind of, they were very popular, they were very influential around their time, but they were very kind of short-lived and then got overshadowed by other stuff. But I think just like my interest in it, just like, even though I'm a one-man team, it's something that just like I found myself diving into and becoming very fascinated with, to the point that I'm like, you know what, I kind of want one of my own. I kind of want to have one of these. And, you know, to be honest, what I'm working on now with my gunsmith is actually having it where we're trying to load 476 shot shell. He's got an old book that says, how do you make 476 casings, and he's trying to see if he can get like 44 special and 45 shot shells and be able to like reload them into the, our modified casings. And, kind of my end goal is like, I want to be able to take this out and go like pheasant hunting with it. I want to be the guy that goes up and kind of, for better lack of terms, I'd be like the guy that punts the pheasants. I get up underneath them, get my foot underneath them, kind of get them up in the air, and then get the first crack at them. I want to have something that's practical, right? I think it's a very cool firearm, and I think it does have a lot of practicality in terms of like today's market and what you can do and what's available out there. And I think this would be a good solution to maybe some of those things that people hadn't considered, or be like, hey, it would be really cool if we had this or that. And, stuff like that doesn't necessarily exist at this time.
Yeah, I agree. I really like this gun too. And I'm glad you're making a reproduction.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I've seen a lot of people that had talked about it and said like, oh man, this would be really cool to have and this and that and everything too. But like there's so few of them made, and like the people that have them, there's only so many of the 4 barrels made. I think like 712 of them, based on a research that they did looking at the ledgers. But like most of the people that have them, they sit in collections. No one shoots them because of like how old they are. You have to find like special type of ammo to shoot it. And then not only that, I've also found ones that have, ended up in places like Canada, or even some of the ones that are still, because like this was from, the UK, and this is from Europe. That's where the Lancaster company was based out of, in London. And their firearms regulations over there are very strict, to the point that like a lot of these have been deactivated. So, finding one that's in more of an applicable caliber and finding one that's actually functioning is really hard to do. And if, people that have these, they mostly just sit on a shelf. So it's unfortunate that no one had taken up this effort to really bring these back or look into it or try to do this beforehand. I think for certain stuff like this, it's something that like they can either sit on a shelf until they're forgotten about, or you can bring back a piece of history. And that's kind of, I guess, what interests me the most too, is like bringing back that really cool piece of history and making it available again.
Are there any other historic firearms that you are planning on recreating if this is a success?
So yes, and actually this kind of the one that I'm looking at kind of goes back to like a little bit of a pet peeve of mine about pistols, and particularly 22s. Don't get me wrong, like 22s are fun guns, but like sometimes the ammo has inconsistencies in it, in terms of like sometimes maybe the bullet doesn't fire, or sometimes there's not enough energy to cycle the firearm, right? I've got a little 22 revolver, and that's fun. But, say you have a semi-automatic 22, sometimes, it won't cycle the action because there's just not enough energy to do that. Or sometimes the bullets don't fire, you get a misfire, and you have to, rack the gun and get that misfire cartridge out of there. So kind of my next firearm that I'd be looking at doing would be I think it's a volcanic repeater, and it's a 22 lever action pistol. But it'd be a really cool firearm pistol to go shooting with. It'd be 22, because it's lever action. With kind of the inconsistencies of the 22 ammo, you could just throw the lever forward and kick out that bad shell and keep going. So I think that would be a really cool firearm to kind of bring back, something that could be, also like almost a very beginner kind of a firearm for 22s, and something that could also, appeal to, say, more of your lever action lovers that like those types of firearms and stuff of the sort too. So it'd be something that's very unique but also practical. Let me see here. I might be able to pull up a picture of one. Can't spell, but that's okay. So yeah, this here, where there's a little 22. It's pretty much just a very small lever action rifle, but it's a pistol size. And so I thought something like this would be really cool. And like I said, it's something that I would actually really get a lot of enjoyment out of, and something that I would use. And to be honest, this would be kind of like my go-to 22 gun if I was going to go out to the range and shoot something. And I don't know if that's just me being bitter about maybe all the 22 pistols that I've shot, but I thought something like this would be very cool, practical, and reliable.
I think that volcanic rifle would be cool too.
Are there any other questions?
I know I asked you on Discord what calibers you were thinking of. Why did you go with the calibers you did?
So 476, 455, they're kind of like your predecessors to your 45 long Colt and your 45 ACP and stuff of the sort like that, right? Back in the late 1800s, the British couldn't decide on any kind of caliber standards. And so you have a whole bunch of these funky rounds, but 476, 455, they're very similar to your 45 long Colt and your 44 special. And so to kind of keep the same caliber and to have something that's still popular. It's very diverse. You know, with your 45 long Colt, you've also got shot shell or 410 that you can use and stuff of the sort like that. So it's, if I look at the design of the pistol that I have right now, I can pretty much do a 1-to-1 reproduction of that and maybe just change a few diameters of the bores to make it use a more modern cartridge and maybe just beef it up a little bit so that way, you know, it won't explode if you use a higher pressure cartridge through it. But it's something that is very similar to specifically the one that I have. And then everything else, 44 Special, your 357, those kind of just get smaller, and at that point you can take the design and you can just scale it down, or take a barrel liner and use a smaller barrel liner or something sort of like that. And it's something that you use, say, like a 45 Magnum or something, that's going to be the hottest round you're going to put through there. And so if it's good for that, and I have an even thicker barrel liner or something that I put through there, so say I use my original design here, and instead of, you know, I keep the design the same, and then I just don't take out as much material and I just make it for a smaller diameter. You know, if it's already good for my 45 Magnum, then 357 would be no problem in there. And using rounds that, you know, some of your more common Magnum rounds, stuff that usually has some sort of a shot shell available in it, so you're not having to go out and try to get your own ammo or stuff of the sort like that. So trying to use stuff that's very similar caliber to what the pistol that I have is, and then stuff that's also more commercially available nowadays.
I think you've answered all my questions, so thank you.
Right on. Mike, do you have any other questions or anything else you think would be worth asking?
My last question is, when do you think you will have a working prototype?
So part of this is, you know, like while I'm trying to do the redesign, I'm also doing stuff with the pistol itself, such as getting ammo loaded for it, trying to get shot shell for it so I can take the original one out and go pheasant hunting with the original, right? If I've got my girlfriend trying to make a holster for it so that way we can get a holster design and stuff made for it. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of going on in parallel. Once again, this is kind of a hobby. This isn't just something that like I throw on the back burner in a couple of months and say, it's just kind of whatever. It is something that I am dedicated to, but like it is a hobby nonetheless. By the end of next year, I definitely want to have like a prototype made. You know, especially from somebody that's like looking at this and supporting this, being like, man, this would be really cool if I had this in my hands next summer or something sort of like that. But like in terms of like what I'm capable of doing, what's the design, trying to find, you know, a manufacturer who can make stuff. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is like I could have this design done tomorrow, and unless I go and find a supplier and pay outrageous fees, it might still be, you know, 8 months to a year before they even get this on the machine. I definitely want to have the design done by early next year, and then hopefully try to get a prototype out by the end of next year. Part of it also for like being, you know, Patreon supporters. You know, some of the higher tiers will have an option to come out and actually, you know, once we proof the prototype, can actually come out and try it and fire it more or less as a trial of the final product. The time frame isn't small, it's not condensed. You know, I'm trying to be realistic about it, but I do definitely want to do stuff to like keep people involved in it. Long story short, to answer your question, I'm hoping by the end of next year, depending on machine shops and how fast they could turn this around, if I were to have the design finished.
So what I'm hearing is you'll have the full gun released before the AK-50.
Sure. Don't hold me to that, but sure.
I have a quick question. You don't have to give a long answer.
Oh, I love long answers, though.
You mentioned having Patreon supporters test out a prototype. I'm wondering where you live or where that would be.
Currently, I'm kind of in the Midwest. That's variable to change, you know, here in the next year or two, depending on work and what have you. Maybe looking at going out to the West Coast somewhere here in the next couple of years. And it'd be more or less something where, like, if Patreon supporters will want to come out, I've got a prototype ready. If you want to test it, you know, it's on you to come out here and give that a try.
Think I have anything else?
Mike, anything else? Any other questions or anything that comes to mind?
No other questions.
All right. Well, if you do think of any questions, feel free to post it up in the Discord, and I can let you know and reply back to that. Or if, you know, you ever have any more questions and you want to listen to me rant some more, we can do another Q&A. But yeah, thanks for joining for this. And, you know, hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Right on. Yeah, so I'm hoping to release some more content and more videos and stuff this month, how the pistol is actually held and like how we're seeing the recoil patterns. And I've got other stuff about documents such as certificates of authenticity and other authentic advertisements from the 1870s and 1880s that I'm going to talk about too. So I'll have some more stuff coming out, but hopefully this was a good informational session and a little sneak peek on what's to come too. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.